So, Caroline Flint, Shadow Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on ProgLoc. Just very keen to get your initial reflections on the elections last Friday for local government in England. What's your perception? Obviously Labour made some impressive gains in the northern cities, but has some way still to go. What are your views on the performance so far?
Well, first of all, I think all of us in the Shadow Cabinet have been very impressed by the fact that, given it's only a year since the last general election, and how dispiriting that was to lose that election, I think in the last 12 months we've really seen a sort of a willingness of our councillors and our candidates and party activists to fight back. And when I looked at some of the figures around our voter ID and contact activity, it was well up there with the sort of activity we saw at the last general election. So I think that's really good, and it shows a party that's we've dusted ourselves off and we're ready to start really getting out there and engaging. And I think that's been part of the last year as well, is when you do knock on doors, when you are doing community campaigning, it's important for us to be listening to what people are saying. And again, in the last year, I know that amongst our Labour groups that are both in control and in opposition, they have been trying to, through this whole cuts agenda we've all been facing, engaging with the public about how to handle them and what to do. And I hope that openness and spirit of transparency will continue, because I think the public respond to that and want to be part of finding some solutions to the challenges ahead. Having said that, Anna, we had some fantastic results. Well, I was going to say last Thursday night. I think for a lot of people it was the early hours of Friday morning, if not later on in the day. Fantastic results around the country, particularly, it has to be said, in the Midlands and the North, both in the North East, Yorkshire and the North West. And I think that really does probably reflect, more than anything else, some of the messages around the unfairness of the cuts and how they've hit some of our poorer neighbourhoods, but also, importantly, because it was very much a factor in these local elections, the betrayal felt by the voters, and actually by some Liberal Democrats as well, about the way the Liberal Democrats have worked in this coalition so far, really being the dented shield, human shield, for many of the policies that on the doorsteps, whether you're in Liverpool or Newcastle or in Sheffield, are very unpopular. And that was certainly reflected on the election night and the day after. We made some progress in the south and in the east, in places like Ipswich. Obviously we won Gravesham. We did increase our number of councillors in other places like Dover, and we had some significant, I think, individual wins by councillors in the southwest and elsewhere. But there is a way to go on that, and part of what we've got to think about is, what is our message to some of those areas in the south and east of England who don't necessarily feel that the messaging that we do to Liverpool and Newcastle is the same for them. Having said that, even though their councils might be better off than some of our councils in the north, it's all in the mix with the other things that are happening as well. People are worried about their jobs in the south of England, they're worried about the squeeze on their family finances, and I think probably more than anything else, the big issue where local government has an important role to play is in relation to housing. And we know in that hothouse of the south, worries and concerns about housing and their kids having to pay even bigger tuition fees on top of finding 25% deposit for mortgages of very high price housing is a real concern, and that's an area that we should be able to find some answers to and find a way that we are reflecting those views.
Thank you. And obviously one of the issues that you raise is around the real collapse that happened to the Lib Dems, particularly in those areas where people are feeling the impact of the cuts. What's your perception on what this means for Lib Dems, both at local government level, but also in terms of the coalition itself?
Well, people were asking me before Thursday about how things would go in terms of Liberal Democrat councillors, and from all the soundings that I'd received, it did seem to me it was going to be a bad night for the Liberals. What I wasn't quite sure about was how much a Liberal Democrat councillor who had, if you like, put the work in as a community councillor, would that provide them with enough resilience against the unpopularity of how their party is performing nationally in the coalition. And actually what came out of Thursday was just such a tide of ill feeling towards some of the decisions that Nick Clegg and his team have made at the top of government, it really was like a tsunami effect, I think, on the ground in terms of their base. And I think really, I imagine that you know, some Liberal Democrats literally are probably feeling a bit like headless chickens at the moment in terms of what to do next. Also importantly, we know that the council base is quite important to the finances of the Liberal Democrat Party, and therefore they'll be feeling the blow from the loss of that support. But I think again, we also know that in a number of areas, Sheffield does spring to mind, that there was quite a lot of deferral of decision making where Liberal Democrats were in control or in coalition in local government. And what we've always said in leading up to these elections, that where we are winning on councils or where we're forming the majority party, that there are really some difficult decisions ahead. And I think how we deal with that and are shown to deal with that is important, because I can see that there will be some Liberal Democrats trying to take advantage of a situation to blame us for the cuts and decisions that might have to be made in the next 12 months. Because no sooner do we blink an eye, we're back to elections again next year and budget setting as well.
And on that point, what would be your message to those new Labour groups who have just taken over control of councils, particularly in those larger cities, who are going to have to implement these difficult decisions and make some really unpopular choices? What would be your message to them?
I think I'd have three messages. One is keep up the community contact work. Not just canvassing, but you know, finding new ways of actually involving people in some of the decisions and debates that you'll be having in the council chamber. So don't go to sleep for the summer and wake up in the autumn when the weather's bad and the nights are drawing in. You know, now's the time to continue to that work. And secondly, I actually think being as open and transparent as possible about the challenges is, you know, a huge strength. I think it shows a confidence, but also a willingness to recognise that actually the people we represent can actually be part of finding some of the answers, but also to make some difficult decisions. And I've always felt as a Member of Parliament that when people ask me to do something, you know, you try to work to find a solution, but actually even if we don't succeed, the fact you've worked with people to try and find a solution, people get that and they understand that. So openness and transparency, I think, is important, because then I think, you know, we can show when we talk about being in this together, we really, you know, put our money where our mouth is. Thirdly, we should also be thinking about innovation and new ideas. We can't just talk about just dealing with the cuts. We also should be thinking about and making space for having a hard look at the services that are provided and whether they could be done better and how they could be improved. Not local government necessarily doing it on their own, but looking at how we can work with others. And even given the restrictions that this government is creating for colleagues at a local level, that doesn't mean it should paralyse us from not being prepared to think out of the box and think about how best we could deliver services. And I think, you know, that's something we should be really focusing on as well. And part of my job is how can I work to enable that to happen, but also where I know that colleagues at a local level are coming up with some good ideas, how can we share that best practice to show that, you know, Labour is, you know, thoughtful and reflective, but very practical as well.
And this sounds very much like, you know, this is where the Labour Party are in power. This is where we can make decisions around the country to impact on people's lives. So finally, what would be your vision? What's your view on what Labour looks like in local government over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think what I'd like us to be seen as being the party who really does find solutions to the challenges and problems, you know, of the 21st century, if you like. A party, and as you said, Anna, you know, the fact is we have got colleagues who are in power at a local level. For me, that's a wonderful opportunity to see how they can be the seedbed for new ideas, whether that's to do with housing or to do with transport, getting people to work, dealing with issues around antisocial behaviour and crime. You know, we have opportunities here. It's not all about threats, and we need to, you know, make sure we don't lose sight of that. But I think it is about good value for money, practically thinking about how we actually deliver services. You can talk about policies, but I know as a minister that unless you spend some time on implementation, even the best, you know, think tank ideas can can falter. But also I hope people see us as the party that really does want to give people more choice and say over the services that affect their everyday lives. So good value, delivering the services that actually people have more of a say over. That's how I think we should be developing our ideas. And so for good ideas, for good value, for feeling that we're getting the job done, people will look to Labour.
Great. Clara and Flint, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna.